Inflation may have peaked in March. That's our top story today on the Wall Report. I'm your host, Greta Wall. The major indices are all higher today despite the Consumer Price Index surging at the fastest pace in more than 40 years. The CPI skyrocketed 8.5% year over year in March and jumped 1.8% monthly. Now that was higher than expectations for an 8.4% increase and marks the fastest annual pace of inflation since December of 1981. Energy prices did lead those gains as Russia invaded Ukraine. Gas prices jumped 48% year over year, while oil prices surged 70.1%. And food prices also logged double-digit gains, with grocery prices up 10% compared to March of 2021. But the core CPI, which excludes food and energy prices, rose 6.5% annually and 0.3% monthly. Now that's the fastest annual increase since August of 1982, but the monthly gain was cooler than expected, giving traders more hope that inflation has possibly topped out. And Treasury yields are pulling back amid that optimism. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note is down 8 basis points to around 2.7% today after popping to 2.82% earlier this morning. And that was the highest yield seen since December of 2018. And while the market is hoping inflation has peaked, small businesses are feeling the pain. The National Federation of Independent Businesses Optimism Index tumbled to a 12-month low in February. That index dropped 2.4 points to 93.2. That was sharply lower than economist expectations for 95.3, and it's the third straight month below the 48-year average of 98. 26% of business owners said high inflation was their number one problem, which is the highest reading since Q3 of 1981. Meantime, 68% of owners said they were increasing prices to make up for their higher cost, which is the highest reading in the survey's history. And oil prices, meantime, are rebounding after a supply warning from OPEC. West Texas Intermediate crude futures are up nearly 7%, topping $100 per barrel. Apologies, I don't have a graphic for this, but Brent crude futures are also up nearly 7% and topping $105 per barrel. OPEC said Tuesday it expects a loss of 7 million barrels per day of Russian oil and other exports, and the group said it would be impossible to replace that supply. Shanghai, China is also beginning to lift some COVID restrictions, relieving fears of lower demand. Now in earnings news, CarMax shares are falling about 6% today after missing fiscal Q4 profit expectations. The auto retailer reported earnings of 98 cents per share versus $1.27 per share expected. The revenue of $7.69 billion, though, beat the consensus estimate for $7.5 billion. The company's CEO blamed declining consumer confidence, the Omicron-fueled surge in COVID cases, vehicle affordability, and the lapping of stimulus benefits paid in the prior year period for that profit miss. CarMax said it plans to open 10 new stores in fiscal 2023. And Albertsons shares are also down about 6% in today's session, despite beating fiscal Q4 expectations. The grocery chain reported adjusted earnings of 75 cents per share on $17.4 billion in revenue, and that topped analyst expectations on both the top and bottom line. Identical sales jumped 7.5% year over year, also crushing expectations. Albertsons forecast fiscal 2022 identical sales growth between 2% and 3%, and adjusted earnings between $2.70 and $2.85 per share. But the midpoint of that earnings range is lower than the consensus estimate for $2.81, which is dragging down the stock in today's session. Now, meantime, Beyond Meat shares are up about 2% after announcing it is expanding distribution of its meatless chicken tenders. Those tenders will now be available at 8,000 new grocery, pharmacy, and big box retail locations. Those include select Albertsons, Sprouts, Whole Foods Markets, and CVS locations. All Kroger locations in the U.S. will also be carrying the meatless chicken tenders by the end of this month. And there is still more inflation data ahead, and that's coming tomorrow morning with the release of the Producer Price Index. And also, JP Morgan Chase and Delta Airlines will be reporting earnings ahead of the open. So be sure you're subscribed to my Coffee with Greta newsletter. There is a link in the description box to sign up, and you'll get all of those details tomorrow morning right at 9 a.m. Eastern. I'll see you all back here for the Wall Report tomorrow at noon. Give this video a like before you go.